Hi, and welcome back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Norman, your host. Well, this week we've got a very cool interview with one of the best sailors in the world, a former Olympian, three-time America's Cup, current flight controller for the America's Cup for American Magic. They're in Barcelona, where we talked to Andrew Campbell. We're going to talk a little bit about San Diego, his time at Georgetown as a four-time All-American, his friendship with probably the best skipper in the world, Tom Slingsby, and growing up in a household where your dad was a three-time Cup veteran and a wife who's also a college sailor. It'll be interesting to talk to him about the variety of subjects, including we got a chance to talk about the Star boat, which was an Olympic boat that he wanted to campaign in the Olympics that was no longer available. But it was a delightful interview with Andrew. We're going to get a chance to talk to him in just a couple seconds, so stay tuned. We're talking with one of the premier flight controllers, Andrew Campbell, who is a former Olympian, world champion, certainly part of the America's Cup group. Andrew, I want to ask the first question and explain to us what flight controller is on the big AC 75. And then the question I want to ask is, do you work on any kind of video games to keep your hands steady?
I don't. The flight control job is something that's been, developing basically since they've been foiling big catamarans, big platforms, since the San Francisco Cup, figuring out how to control the platform once it does leave the water, once the hull comes out of the water, and you lose that stability of the platform. That instability, the inherent instability of being up on two foils all of a sudden, or three in the catamarans. But that inherent instability, it needs to be kind of checked by somebody, and then understood how those dynamics work and how they affect the platform and how you can optimize to make the platform faster that way. But like I said, it's a pretty new part of our game, and I didn't grow up knowing that was something I was going to do. I grew up as a dinghy sailor. I grew up sailing lasers and 420s and FJs around the club. So I didn't know that was going to be my job when I joined American Magic. I joined American Magic after doing the campaign in Bermuda in the catamarans as a tactician, as a grinder, and I anticipated kind of continuing on that track. So, when it did come to fruition that, hey, we're going to have a full-time flight controller dedicated only to that, and who's capable of doing that within our squad, I was as experienced as anybody, having driven the catamarans in Oracle and having done some flight control there, so I understood a little bit about it, and that slowly evolved into the job that I have now. And it turns out it's a pretty small little universe. There's really only a handful of guys that have very much experience doing that role. And for sure at the 50 level, there are more and more people being introduced to it at the Sail GP level. But at the America's Cup level, it's a small group of people. So it's an interesting gig, and it's a work in progress for all of us. To answer your other question, my steady hand doesn't necessarily come from any of that. It just comes from a long career of hand on the tiller, and knowing instinctually what's going to happen when the puff hits and when the lull hits, and knowing, okay, here's what's going to come next. That's going to affect the platform, and knowing the effect that it would have on the main sheet and the tiller. That's all you really need to know. It's just a question of the impact that you're going to make on the platform. That is the thing that changes between platforms and between foils and all that. So
is there a
long way to say.
I'm sorry. Is there a correlation between tiller and flight control? Is it fairly common between the two?
I think so. It's certainly, the helm makes a big impact on the load on the foil. You'd imagine if you turn down onto when you get a puff hits or a header and you turn down, it loads the foil more, and you have to react to that. And likewise, if you see a lift coming or a puff coming and you have to turn up and away from the foil, it loads it differently. Same way as when you go through a tack or a jibe, there's a significant impact on how the foils load and unload, and so you have to be ready to do that and try to manage them that way.
For those of us who are monohaulers, for the most part, you also got to figure out that grinders use their arms, and the guys on your boat now are using their legs because it's bike riders. So yeah. The sport really has changed dramatically which is really what America's Cup's all about. I go all the way back to when your dad was around, because your dad had done 3 cups. Go back to the Connor's catamaran versus the monohull back in the day. That was the first time they'd gotten away from all of the same sort of 12-meter stuff. And we're kind of back to the cutting edge of the sport. How does it help the sport in your mind?
Well, it's always been a development game. So I think even when it was in those 12-meter eras, when it was in the J class, they were always pushing the limits of of the platforms, of the composite structures, of how to build masts and the rigging and wire sheets and moving on to higher quality rope sheets. They're always pushing the envelope in terms of the equipment they're using. And yeah, it seems like it's made a quantum leap to jump into this foiling environment. And I think it's a really great thing for the sport. I hear you. I grew up in the same thought process. I watched the America's Cup happen as a kid at my home club, and it's something that I always aspired to do. And I had no concept of the fact that it would be looking like it does now when I was a kid. And so just because it's changed doesn't mean it's anything different from our standpoint. We're just out there to make sure we're going a little bit faster than the other boat next to us, and that's our priority. So at the end of the day, it's still a sailboat race, and it's going to be decided on tenths of a knot, quarters of a knot, here and there, and executing good game plans on the water. So from that standpoint, it's probably oversimplifying it, but we try to boil it down to that. The reality is, like you say, that it demands a lot from the sailors. It demands a lot, probably more, from the designers to make sure the platform is going to be faster than the other guy.
In San Francisco and Chicago, both the SailGP guys, they've introduced for the Navigator a new 15-point box. It gives them a little more control, so they and the skipper are part of that process. Are you familiar with that? And the question becomes, are you guys doing the same thing with your boat that they're doing with SailGP guys?
We share a lot of technology across that, that, like you say, we're at the cutting edge, and SailGP does meet that edge oftentimes with how they're handling the software side. We're going to be using some shared software, for instance, on the AC40 racing between all the teams to kind of normalize the one design platform there. So we do share a lot of kind of how those technologies work. The reality is that, and this is part of that kind of cutting edge that you're talking about, each of the teams, they're developing their own systems about how they're making these platforms work. And when the campaigns end, oftentimes those designers, those sailors, and those systems engineers will move on to other organizations and bring that knowledge with them. And it's a direct, effect on that other platform, wherever they're moving to, wherever it's the AC50 or like you can look at the AC50 flight control box and that it was designed by Parco, by Luke Parkinson and the Ineos group from that Artemis campaign in Bermuda. So, they're direct, lineages of how these developments work. And the pros and cons because you've been through the development process and maybe your preferences on top of that. But we are definitely watching carefully to see how other teams develop, and understanding why they're going down those rabbit holes is part of the job. It's part of the fun, and saying, hey, okay, let's look down that rabbit hole for a minute and make sure that we're not missing anything. And if they're down one that we think we ought to be down as well, then we'll go chasing after them.
I asked the question because obviously the boats are faster than they used to be, but we've also seen some of the crashes, and it's also more spectacular because carbon fiber seems to break faster than what fiberglass used to do. And when it breaks, it's not real pleasant. Even your own skipper, Terry Hutchinson, was in a pretty bad, break in 21. So my question is that you're sort of on the edge a little farther because you are going with greater speed. And obviously the higher the boat flies, the faster it goes. But how cognizant are you of the safety issue of knowing that if you go just past that line of demarcation, there could be an issue? And is that basically your job, right?
It is. It's part of all of our jobs is to mitigate that risk by training and being ready for any of those situations. But for sure the equipment's being pushed to a performance edge that is not necessarily always, we have safety margins that the engineers are working for us, but every bit that you take out of that margin oftentimes translates directly into performance. So the rule has limitations on how those safety margins can be cut, and so it does try to protect the athlete and protect the sailor. And the sailors provide feedback, and they're saying, hey, we're not willing to compromise on this, and we're willing to compromise on that. But my wife, my parents, my kids, they look at me going out racing high performance platforms like this, and sometimes they're scratching their heads wondering, why we're taking these risks. And it's a hard question to answer. We're I think all kind of driven to push our sport to a place where it's both exciting and something that we want to go and do every day. And at the moment we're definitely caught in a very fast version of our game, and I think it's really exciting. I think it's definitely got room to make it safer for everybody else, and that's probably our responsibility as sailors and designers on the cutting edge, to make sure that we're understanding what those safety margins look like and how to pass some of those safety concepts essentially down to the other parts of sailing. And I think that's happened in the past as well. The reality is that most of those structural engineers are also designing stuff in other parts of the game too, and so they're learning things in the high performance environment that then they can take down to other parts of our sport that I think benefit everybody.
Okay. Well, let me take you backwards. You consider yourself a Jersey boy, having been born in Bennecket Bay, Toms River. Yeah. Are you a San Diego native? And I say that because you went to the Bishop School, and I used to coach at Fallbrook. So we weren't that far apart in terms of, obviously we're part of in age and stuff, but are you consider yourself a Jersey boy or a California kid?
I'm a big Padres fan. I grew up in that late 90s, early 90s era when the Padres were really hot, and Tony Gwynn is, one of my all-time sporting idols. So, I do have a lot of really great family and friends who are still on the Jersey Shore, and I spent a lot of great time there racing, sailing, and with my family. I've got some family in upstate New York as well. And so, yeah, I'm spread all over. My wife's from Annapolis, and I went to Georgetown. So, we've got a really strong East Coast connection that we enjoy. And shoot, anywhere we go racing around this country, I feel like I've got some really, really great friends and family. But at the end of the day, we're a San Diego family, and that's the baseball cap we're putting on anyway.
Okay. You what's the first boat you ever got into you can remember as a solo artist?
Goodness. I think, we started sailing sabbats when we were, young sailors in San Diego. And so that was certainly the first exposure I had to sailing by myself. You slowly kind of evolve into the other kind of junior classes, be it the Laser or the FJ in San Diego, and then into the Club 420 or the other performance classes that were driving towards Olympic classes. But at the end of the day, the Laser was really the one that took me from being a local sailor to, say, being able to compete with, sailors from around the country and internationally. And, the Laser is, at the end of the day, the platform that taught me the most about how to perform on a given day and how to prepare to perform. And it introduced me to some great sailors. I'm laughing because I have, Tom Slingsby's a teammate of mine here, and he and I raced against each other when we were 18 years old at the Youth Worlds in Canada. So, here we are 22 years later, going to go racing together on this, platform that looks nothing like that. I will add that, sailing, high school sailing and college sailing added, a dynamic to my sailing, and that, I couldn't have gotten had I just continued laser sailing for the rest of my career. I think that, dealing with the dynamics of a bigger team and having a teammate on board with me, that changed who I was as a sailor and made me a better person as well. So, there's no way that I could, work within an organization of 125, 130 people like this one, without the college sailing experience to kind of guide me on those dynamics too. So, the development of a sailor into an America's Cup teammate, is something that's kind of a long time coming. There's a lot of experiences that kind of all fall into that bucket, if it makes sense.
Well, you also have a dad who's a three-time Cup participant. You also come from a club across the bay from where I was at Southwestern that has a few guys that have a clue what they're doing. So when you have that kind of environment, I guess I come out of the ski racing world. So if you live in, Aspen, you're going to have a greater chance if you live in Idaho or if you live in, Iowa or someplace. So
Yeah.
did you recognize at a young age the advantage in terms of at least the environment that you were surrounded by?
I don't think I recognized it. It's a really good point, though. For sure, the normalcy of that level of excellence, that level of pursuit, was something that it didn't faze me at all. And so when you rub shoulders with those people every day, in the boat park, and you say, hey, how do you solve this problem? And you watch somebody on the Snipe or on the Star or on, some of the local Etchells fleet or, these great sailors, you watch them problem solve in these intimate ways, right? In their piece of equipment, in their home club, you see them go through those processes that, are honed from a lifetime of kind of excellence there, right? Like these sailors have developed over many iterations of how to get to become a better sailor. And so to be exposed to that for sure, enabled me to say, well, this is normal. It's normal to be able to approach a problem like this, try to solve a problem by involving other teammates, by involving intelligent people, by involving people who are better than me, right? That's the step I think that probably set my career apart maybe from others, was that I was never afraid to go out and say I need to race against people who are better than me, and that's the only way that I'm going to improve. And so I don't think I raced against, other than going to youth regattas, I don't think I raced against people my age until I was way beyond the Olympic level of my career.
Explain the difference between a Sabot and a Optimist in terms of, because Sabot's basically a West Coast boat.
Yeah, the Sabot's it's a pram. It's just like they'd have a Sabot like that in the east coast of Australia. They'd have El Toros in Hawaii. They'd have Optimists most everywhere else in the world. But it's a square, blunt nose, blunt bow pram. The Sabot has a sleeve mast like you have in a laser, so it's a little bit more direct translation, a little more translatable into the laser, for instance. But it's a lot harder to capsize and get back upright. So that's you pay a price when you turn a Sabot over to get it back upright. So the Optimist was definitely more forgiving that way. But the biggest regret probably that I have is that you watch some really great sailors be able to go and race in some incredible places against some long-term friends that they continue to have from a very young age, from 14, 15, 16 years old. So I didn't really get those experiences until I was 17, 18, 19, a couple years later. So in the same breath, there are some really great sailors and great teammates of mine here that didn't even start sailing until that time. So there are many paths towards getting to a place like the America's Cup, for instance.
We got a lot of young guys that watch this. For those an early part of your career, is the time in the boat more than it's examining how you sail, what's in the boat? And I guess that we have a couple kids that are on the development team that are from this area that are on 49ers. And they keep talking to me about how much time they've got to be in the boat. And I keep taking back to the point is if you can spend all day in the boat, but you're not working on the quality of being in time in the boat, it doesn't matter. So maybe speak to that briefly.
Sure. I mean, well, it's a good point. The quality is absolutely, a major part of the token. I guess that oftentimes young sailors will come and they'll say, okay, what's the best thing that I can do to become a better sailor, or to go to the Olympics, or to be, on the America's Cup track or race in CLGP. I always respond to them by saying, if somebody says, hey, do you want to go sailing this weekend? The answer should be yes. And let me explain. I agree that for sure, high quality time when you're pursuing a specific task, right? When you're pursuing 49er racing or laser sailing, to achieve a specific goal on the Olympic circuit, for instance, you need to isolate what that goal is and break that goal into however many bite-sized chunks it's going to take to get there, and start biting them off one at a time, and understand, okay, when I get to the end of this bite, I'm going to have to take 5 more to make sure I'm continuing down the track, right? And that's to your point, where, okay, I need to make sure that every bite is one worth taking, right? Is a quality bite that's actually moving in the direction towards my goal. But maybe one step back from that is to say, hey, any chance you get to go sailing on any platform should be a place that you can look back to and say, that's improved my capability to be a better sailor in the future, right? If it was crewing on a snipe, when I was 10 or 12 years old, I guarantee you I was learning things then that are helping me be a better sailor now, and probably were helping me be a better laser driver 5 or 7 years later, right? And being a better laser helmsman, helped me be a better star sailor. Being a better star sailor helped me develop rig tuning concepts that now I'm using on the big boat here. That helped me in the TP52, or just help me be a better teammate, help me tolerate somebody that I didn't really want to go sailing with that day. That might be a lesson in itself, right? Just saying yes to a situation and saying, wow, I never want to do that again. That's a great answer, right? So
Right.
Just approaching it from that perspective, saying, hey, the answer is yes, I want to go. And then into yourself saying, okay, what can I learn from this situation? How can I understand how I can get better from this? What will I take away that I know I want to repeat in the future? And what will I say, no, I'm absolutely not going to do that in the future. And I'm going to make sure that my teammates won't do it either. Those are all really valuable lessons, and they only come from a really wide breadth of experience. And it's amazing how doing something unexpected, sailing a boat that you maybe didn't anticipate benefiting from, can turn around your perspective on how to make high quality days in the platform that you're making them in. So that kind of goes both ways into what you're saying, though. I think time on the water is just the absolute king of these things. But you're right, having a direct kind of concept of where that time on the water is driving you towards has to be a part of the goal making process.
As a coach, sometimes I try to make sure kids understand that the quality of the rep is as important as the time on the rep. Because as well as I do, 10, 12, 15, 16-year-old high school kids drift. And if you're drifting, it's hard to get a quality rep. They don't necessarily always pick it up 100%, but you try to get them at least to understand the premise that 9 great ones are better than 14 average ones, because there's just more value to it. And you don't want to develop bad habits. I don't think that's a secret by any stretch.
Yeah. No, you're right. And just, I think as well, just teaching the concept of why we're doing this rather than how, just saying, hey, well, let's back up. You don't need to do 20 reps. You just need to do it right a couple of times. And this is why. And I think, getting into those details, will improve the quality, like you're saying. I think it's a really interesting conversation. It's definitely so unique for each sailor. Then that's why my response to everybody is always just, hey, the answer when somebody says, do you want to go sailing this afternoon? The answer is yes. Because that will just broaden your horizons on what is capable of happening to and what people are doing out there, and it'll expose you to something new.
San Diego to Georgetown, 4-time All-American, great college career. How does somebody go across the country to go? And my follow-up to it is, what did you study and what was your degree in?
Yeah. So I have a Bachelor of Science in Foreign Service. I was laughing about it with these guys at lunch today because I think I took 4 economics courses, and all the engineers in here think that I have a BS, that's going to be able to help them, figure out the structural, limitations of our platform here. My science background is completely on the job learning here. So, but I do have a degree in foreign service. So, my interest was always in that. I felt like I was inclined to go to a school like that. I'll be completely honest with you. Georgetown was absolutely the best school that I got into, and it's been the greatest thing that's probably happened to me in my life, because the coach that I had there, Mike Callahan, is he comes from a humanist background. His viewpoint is on making better people and then making better sailors second. So he was always concerned about making sure that I was on the right track for what I wanted to be doing, whether it was Olympic sailing. He for sure knew what my right track was college sailing wise, but he didn't try to lead me to the water. He tried to, show me where the water was and let me take myself there. So it was definitely a unique experience that I would, I wouldn't give up to anybody for the world. I met my wife there. My brother went to school there. We got a lot of really great connections there. Like I said, I have East Coast connections with some of my family, and I wasn't afraid of going that far east. I knew that I was reluctant to go too cold, but I definitely, I knew that sailing could carry me to get a good education somewhere, because I was in a good place, from a recruiting standpoint. But I had a couple of really nice options, and I just lucked out at the end of the day.
Does a 20-year-old Andrew Campbell end up with foreign service? I'm assuming diplomatic corps. Is that kind of where you were headed?
I have some classmates who work in embassies, and consulates around the world. I've got a lot of classmates who, work in DC and in the business of government. So that certainly would be one of my tracks. But I've been really fortunate to be able to continue sailing throughout my career here. And, the Jesuit education there is one that's, I think, pretty special. It's definitely one that I can recommend. It's it's not necessarily my I'm not a very religious person specifically, but the Jesuit concept and how those institutions are set up is unique, and I think it's something that I really reflect upon in a positive way. I think that that humanist teaching that I'm talking about is something that's pretty cool. I think it's very it's something I carry forward when I talk to my kids and try and how I teach them. And it's very individualized, and it definitely made me a better person, and continues to.
As you mentioned, you met your wife in college. You did a 3-minute video for your daughter, and for Wolf and for Margot, when they were, I guess, maybe 3 or 4 months old. And in that video, you called your wife a badass. So my question: who's the best sailor in the family? Is it you, or is it your wife, or is it your dad, or who is the best sailor in the house?
Really good question. That'd be a fun battle, actually. We have such a great time. At San Diego Yacht Club, they have a great fleet of J22s that we all race together, and as club members. And so when we go and do our club championship roundup, we trade the helm around. So my brother Michael will drive, my dad will drive, Jacqueline drives. Every once in a while I get my hand on the tiller, but we come from a really great sailing family, from a great sailing background. I watched my mom and dad racing together for many years. My grandparents on both sides raced together. So we have a very feminist approach to how we race our platforms. My wife drives, and I try to not be overbearing as a tactician oftentimes, but I think that's our best combination. We'll put it that way.
Okay, so you're not going to tell me who the best sailor in the Campbell household is.
Excellent to sail with. So we've slowly developed our team to a point where we can race the J22 on opening day, the 4 of us, and it will continue to evolve here as we move forward.
Okay, that's a great answer. So I'll assume that the wife is a better sailor than you are. No, I'm kidding. I get that part.
Team effort.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. You've also been fortunate to be surrounded by lots of really good sailors. But talk briefly about what it's like to pull the colors on for the country. You were an Olympian. That had to be a great experience. And I asked that question of every Olympic sailor, Olympic athlete I've ever had a chance to interview. Okay. On the media side, I had a chance to cover a number of them from Lake Placid all the way through to a number of, I don't know, 7 or 8. It's just it's a sporting event, but it's not like anything. It's not even as good as what you're doing with America's Cup, at least in my opinion. Yeah. I don't know if you feel the same way.
No, it is unique for sure. The Olympic experience, even the Pan Am experience, is very similar. You know, when you represent, you know, all of your competitors that have come through the process in your own country, and you go through your Olympic trials, and you say, okay, I've won my Olympic trials, and now I have to represent my teammates, you know, from back home, you know, on a platform where it's just me. That's a big responsibility. It's definitely something that I, you know, pursued just completely relentlessly for a number of years, for 10 or 15 years, honestly, between the laser and the star. So, you know, I was really fortunate to win an Olympic trials and then go to the Olympic Games. It's totally unique. It's totally overwhelming. And, you know, I didn't perform at the games at the level that I thought I could. And, that's definitely a regret that I have, but the experience that I gained through that whole process was beyond just the sailing side of it. And you know, I'll be totally honest with you, I was a better star sailor than I ever was a laser sailor. And, you know, I went to the games sailing the laser. So it's definitely just a part of the process of becoming the sailor that I am today. But, you know, being a part of that group is something that's you're so confined to the Olympic Village, to your Olympic teammates. It's something that you will never be able to you know, explain to anybody that you know, really, you say, okay, I had to rely on my teammates in that environment in ways that, you know, you never expect to. And yeah, to walk into that opening ceremonies in Beijing with 100,000 people in the stadium, you know, cheering for everyone, it's special for sure. It's extremely rewarding because you know how much effort every single one of those athletes that's on the floor with you has put in. And, you know, for some people, just to be there at all is, you know, the lifetime, you know, achievement. So, you know, to know that it was kind of a stepping stone to where I wanted to become as a sailor is just really lucky. And, you know, it took a lot of hard work, a lot of sacrifice on my family's side, on my wife's side for me to do that. And, you know, that's a moment that you just kind of can step back and in retrospect say, hey, those are special moments for sure.
There's a big star race every year here in Gull Lake that everybody shows up to, KR, Mark Struby, all those guys. It's obviously now no longer an Olympic boat, and that's always a, you know, contentious point when you talk to those guys.
Yeah.
Just yes or no, but do you think Star should still be part of the Olympic program?
I don't know. You know, the Star class is thankfully going to survive with or without the Olympics. I think that's always been the Star class's attitude. And I think that that's always been the best kind of strength of the class. It's a fraternity of people that, you know, has probably improved our sport in ways that I think very few people are kind of cognizant of. You know, the quality of sailors that have come through the class, how the class has managed to develop through different iterations of, you know, through the fiberglass stuff, through having all the rig designs that it's had. It's open enough and yet one design enough that it's been able to be a really, really competitive class for 100 and however many years. And so that's, you know, testament to the design, but also a testament to the quality of people that have been in the organization. And yeah, no, I feel really, really fortunate to have been kind of a part of that fraternity. And I think that's the best word to describe it, because the sailors that are involved in that class continue to be supportive of me. And I, you know, I can't be more thankful for it.
If you had an afternoon off, which that probably doesn't come very often, but if you had an afternoon off, what's your favorite boat to sail by yourself?
My favorite boat to go see on is by myself.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a big hedge. That's a big caveat. My favorite boat to go stay on is the one I can go stay on with my kids and my wife.
Okay.
So
Fair enough.
the J22 in San Diego, hey, if I'm gonna go stay on with those guys and we're gonna go look at sea lions, that's the best afternoon I can possibly imagine. You know, I will I'll throw you a bone here that I really, really enjoy the Star. I think that there's like a special place in my heart somewhere for racing the E-Scow. Like I think that the Scows are just so much fun. The fleet is really fun. The kind of fact that we could go stay on with the four of us is just that's probably almost the ideal platform for us at the moment.
You have a new teammate, Mr. Melgus, who's they sell a lot of scows. That's he brings some talent to the table that's a little bit unique in that perspective. It's part of the process. When did you know that you could make a living at being a professional sailor? And then the follow up, was it before you went to Oracle in 2015?
That's a good question. Good question. First, I will definitely shout out to Harry. He's done such a great job here jumping into this program. I think it's really exciting having him here. And yeah, all those scout guys, they're all apparent wind sailors and they all come out, you know, they're all ice boat sailors in the wintertime. So all this stuff translates really well to those guys. And
Yeah, it does.
it's pretty cool to see some of the perspectives that they have on how this type of sailing works. And it's really fun to have them here. You know, to answer your question, I knew that there was a possibility to make a living in sailing from that kind of boyhood age, right? Like where I knew that a lot of the people that my dad was working with were full-time professionals in the sport. You know, I also knew that it was a really hard, you know, road. I knew that there were not many people who, you know, could do it full time without, you know, also working in a sail loft or also working in the industry somewhere, you know, locally. So, you know, to do it in that format where, you know, I was traveling from event to event, really specifically being compensated for racing. That's a small group of people, and you know, it's not something that I ever really assumed. It's definitely something I aspired to, but I didn't, you know, anticipate really that it was gonna. You can't always anticipate that it's gonna work out. The number of people that break through to the, you know, the America's Cup level are few and far between, and probably fewer and farther between than it's ever been before. You know, we were talking about it with a couple of the cycler guys here that are running with us. They, you know, were asking about the Valencia days of the Cup, right? When, you know, because we have 5 teams on the harbor here in Barcelona. Okay, well, you imagine having 11 teams with 40 sailors each, right? We've got 5 teams with 20 sailors each. So it's a really different environment. And that said, there's a much bigger kind of foundational level of professional sailing that's going on out there that's probably more accessible now than it was in that era. So, you know, you can make a living racing small keelboats as well. Just, you know, so I think that there are a lot of ways to skin that cat, and I've been really, you know, fortunate to be exposed to this level, you know, from those Oracle days, you know, where I got a call from a friend that said, "Hey, do you want to come and try this out?" And my answer was yes.
Yeah. Answer, don't answer. And I understand the question maybe puts you in a tough spot, but should the America's Cup, if you're representing America, should we have an English accent on the boat, an Australian accent, or an American accent? Not that it matters. I'm just curious. And I asked that question at Sail GP because if you look at the American boat with Spithill and some of the guys on the boat, very few of them are from here. Is it the best athlete? Because this would be true in any other professional sport. And I'm making something out of nothing.
Yeah, I don't know if Graham might not agree with me here. The you know, I have an interesting perspective on it. I think that you know, at the end of the day, the America's Cup rule is going to dictate that nationality clause, right? And so we as a team need to understand what our best opportunity to win is within that rule, right? The current rule dictates that you had to be a resident of the country to qualify for the last America's Cup. It has nothing to do with this time frame. And so there are guys who have been waiting, in the wings for 2 cups trying to get in to race for a country that they're essentially being, discriminated against because of their nationality. And so I think that's a huge mistake for the America's Cup. But at the end of the day, we play by the rules that they set, and we're going to make sure that we have the best people available to help us win. And I guarantee you that us going and winning the regatta will make a bigger impact on American sailing than the accent of that person helping to make that win happen. So the best thing that we can do is go out and win, and we're going to find the best people available to make that happen. So, the national, nationality clause and how that concept works on a commercial standpoint is definitely interesting. There are focus groups, I'm sure, that indicate one way or another about how they line up when they see our boats racing on television. They say, okay, well, I'm going to cheer for the American team because that's got the American flag on it. And that makes sense. If the American team's winning, then there are going to be more people rooting for that team. And in the same breath, if the American market is bigger than, the Australian market, then that team's probably going to be worth more than the Australian team, regardless of whether they're winning or not. So there's a lot of ways to look at it. And,
right.
Frankly, from a sailor's perspective, you want to be hired because of your skill and capability. And to be limited by a nationality rule is pretty difficult. And it's a hard pill to swallow if you're on the wrong side of that rule. I'm pretty fortunate that I'm on the right side of that rule and can be hired to work for a team that, I understand and kind of gravitate towards the culture on. But it's a complicated concept, and it's one that we need to kind of, probably recognize for what it is, that it's not always as simple as it's laid out to be.
San Diego just hosted the World Champion Lacrosse World Championships, and I was assistant coach with the New Zealand team. It had 24 kids on the team, and there were 4 of them from New Zealand. 20 of them were Americans. They had some background in the world changes it. So, the best athletes should end up in the best places. So, last couple questions. Are Margot and Wolf growing up or starting to grow up the same way that you did? Are they in the boat a lot? And they've got to be what, 5, 6 years old now?
Yeah, my guys are going to turn 8 this summer. They, we really enjoyed our time when we were in San Diego racing or sailing the J22s a lot. I reference that a lot as our kind of baseline. Anytime we get on the water together, we're going to go and do it, whether it's on the foil boards or on the, just in the water surfing or whatever. I think that, having them be comfortable in the environment, having them be on like a fun first program is always our priority here. If they show the interest in racing, if they show the interest in developing sailing skills, then I think that we're probably uniquely qualified to help them do that. But that's going to come from them, not from us. We're so excited to see them, enjoying this experience as a America's Cup kid. I mean, they've lived in Newport and Pensacola, they've lived in Auckland, they were born in Bermuda, then now they're living in Barcelona, they're going to school here. So their experiences are completely unique to what my experiences were, and I can't even begin to presume how it's impacting them. I know it's making them resilient because they're having to learn Catalan and Spanish in school here, but they they're definitely really, really fun to be their dad.
Last question. When I talked to Terry about 8 or 9 months ago, I asked him, he was 0 for 5 in the America's Cup. When I asked him what winning would mean, he just kind of sighed and said relief, which I thought was one of the best answers we've had in the 110 shows we've done. Your dad's won a cup. I don't believe you have. Am I correct?
No, I haven't.
So let me ask you the question. Let me ask you the straight up question. What's an American victory mean for you?
Yeah, to win the America's Cup would be absolutely a lifetime goal. It would be vindication of a pursuit that has been always driving towards that as a goal. As I do more of these campaigns, I am starting to recognize that it's definitely not always up to the sailor. It's about having the best team around you and having the best designers, having the best shore team, having the best sailors all coming together at that right moment. And so I'm definitely I can see great teams that I've been on that haven't won, and I can see the rewarding nature of those environments. Understanding when you can be a part of a team that's not great and still win, is that still going to be a rewarding moment? I don't know. So this is a good team that we're on right now. I'm really excited about our chances, and I think that this is uh, a unique opportunity to have a really good chance to win this trophy. And to do that would be a fulfillment of a lot of years of goal making, of taking bites towards that goal that I know is out there.
From Doug to Terry, all the way down to the last guy on the crew. There's an assembly of certainly a lot of talent and a lot of dedication, and well financed, but also right on the cusp of understanding the technology of the sport, and that's kind of what you do as a flight controller.
Yeah, we definitely feel like we know less and less every day because we're digging into these problems and scratching our heads and saying, "Wow, I didn't really understand the full depth of this, hole that we're jumping into." And the further you get into it, the more little nooks and crannies you find and say, "Hey, all right, there's gains to be made here, and let's go make them."
Well, and I'll leave you with this: the coolest guy that I've met in covering this in the last 3 years has been Tom Slingsby. He's just a first class guy. And when he come to Chicago, when he was in San Francisco, he'd spend all day with you and just answer your questions. And Phil Robertson, another one. But there were some guys that are a little bit different off the ice. So like I said, you guys have assembled a great crew. So best of luck. I can't tell you how much I appreciate this, and hopefully we'll be spending some time rooting for you here coming in the next year or so.
Got it. Anytime you get over to Barcelona, you let us know.